Okay, Unit 6, page 1, Asexual Reproduction. Do now. What is asexual reproduction? Write down your thoughts in the do now and press pause. When you're ready to check your answer, hit play. Asexual reproduction is reproduction with only one parent. Offsprings are identical to the parent, and there is no sperm or egg involved. There are several types of asexual reproduction. There's binary fission, budding, sporulation, regeneration, and vegetative propagation. We're going to take a minute to kind of go through each of these and see what some diagrams look like. Oftentimes the regents will show you a diagram and you need to identify that it is asexual reproduction. So binary fission is the first. This is when a parent divides into two parts that are equal. So the example here that we have are bacteria, paramecium, euglena, and amoeba. These are all organisms that will divide using binary fission. We can see here how binary fission, we have a single cell, the nucleus is copied, because remember, the nucleus contains the, that's right, DNA. And so when we copy the DNA, then we're making two identical cells. And then slowly the cytoplasm will actually divide, and so that the cell membranes become separate. So we get two identical cells that have the same exact genes in the nucleus, but they are separate cells. Budding is when the parent divides into two unequal parts. Example are organisms like yeast and hydra. So again, we see a diagram or a picture here of these are actually yeast cells, and we can see how small little pieces are pinching off that are unequal, but they're still genetically identical. So if we look at the diagram here, we can see how the nucleus again is going to copy so that each of these cells are going to inherit the same genetic information, and then we get two unequal cells so that the parent is larger than the two offspring. Sporulation is the process by which spores are released from the parent. They germinate and grow to form new organisms. So example would be things like mushrooms and molds. Now, these are microscopically, so you cannot see these spores on the actual bread itself, but mold will form spores that then travel through the air. Regeneration is the development of an entire new organism from part of the original organism. So examples here include starfish, earthworms, and planarian. So we'll see here an example with the planarian, how if we kind of pull this worm apart, we're actually developing into two separate organisms. So again, here's a diagram of the planarian. If we actually cut it into separate pieces, they'll both develop into full organisms. This you might want to think of too, that there are certain lizard species that if the tail is removed, the tail will grow back. That's another form of asexual reproduction, because again, you're having regeneration because they're regenerating part of their body using asexual reproduction. The last one we're going to look at is vegetative propagation. This is the process where a new plant is produced from a portion of another plant. So the example here is grafting. We call them cuttings or runners. So if we take the clipping of one plant and we cut that off and we actually stick it into soil, sand, or compost, and we can actually grow a genetically identical plant to the parent, but now we have two plants instead of one. So here's an example of some cuttings from trees or plants where we can actually regrow new plants. Grafting is another form of asexual reproduction, and here we're taking part of a fruit tree and adding it to another, and then again through the process of cell division we have them growing into one plant. So here's the example. Another one are runners. So for example, this is a mint plant that the runner's underground. So above ground, if you kind of drew an imaginary line here, these look like all separate plants, but underground it's actually the same plant. So in summary, what do all these processes have in common? What are some advantages of reproducing with only one parent? And what might be some disadvantages? Pause the video here and restart it when you're ready to check your answers. Okay, so I guess you're ready to check your answers. So for the first one, how do all these processes, what do they all have in common? Well, all of them involve a single parent, and the offspring is identical to that parent. And for the second one, some advantages. Well, the fact that there are expected outcomes to reproduce a desirable trait. So for example, if I want to make many more mint plants, I know that I'm going to get the same exact one as before. So expected outcomes is sometimes desirable, especially in farming. Some disadvantages are that no genetic variation is going to increase your susceptibility to pathogens. So you're all going to have the same weaknesses to the same pathogen. And the last part. For your summary, write 2 insightful questions and their answers below. You might ask someone to check their understanding of the content from this video. You may not use one of the questions already present in this handout, so come up with 2 original questions and their answers. Please put it on your handout now.